Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of CRATV, where we talk politics, policy, and politicians, all from a conservative perspective, right here in the great state of California. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, please make sure, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, and in both cases, make sure you hit the notification button. That way you can get the notifications as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat as the program is going on. Also want to encourage you to also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. One other thing that I want to make sure to note before we get on with today's topic, once again want to remind you that the annual convention, the 2020 annual CRA convention, has been postponed. Once everything here in the state of California has been lifted, as you know, we're kind of under an order right now to be kind of sheltered in place or not be doing big gatherings. So we just want to make sure that we're doing our part to help keep our members and the rest of our fellow Californians safe. So we'll be letting you know as soon as that's going to be back up and running, as soon as that program is back on track. Also want to encourage you, if you want to get all the latest information and updates on what's going on with the California Republican Assembly, please make sure to visit us at cragop.org. That's cragop.org. It's the place to go to get information and news about what's going on with the California Republican Assembly and conservative politics here in the great state of California. All right, now we all know that things are a little tenuous here in the state of California. We all know right now that many municipalities had already issued orders or at least put recommendations out asking people to not congregate in large groups, to basically try and not go to work, but to kind of stay at home, not congregate in public areas. Not, by the way, under the quote unquote lockdown, it's not that you have to stay home. It's just if you're going to go out, please practice social distancing and stuff like that. Let's make sure we be safe so that we reduce the spread of the COVID virus. But one of the things that whether it's the politicians or at the very least the media doesn't seem to be concerned about is the spread of negative campaigning and lies that are taking place relating to COVID-19. One of the things, and I think that it's interesting, from the very first moment, I think when you started looking at media coverage of the response to COVID-19, was the way in which, or the difference in which they looked at Democrat politicians, in many cases governors of predominantly Democratic states, and the way in which they looked at the President of the United States. In fact, when Democratic, like a governor or basically a governor would come out and say, okay, this is what's going on, this is what we're doing in our state, this is what we're asking everybody to do, they largely stuck to the facts of what it was that was being asked and why it was being asked. But when it came to President Donald Trump, and this was, from the very beginning, from his very first real public address, the one he did from the Oval Office, all of the coverage that has been done, okay, I won't say all, I will say most of the coverage that has been done by the mainstream media has largely been about criticizing President Donald Trump. Whether or not he said the things that they felt that he should have said, whether or not he was doing the things that they felt he should have been doing, and in some cases even misrepresenting or lying about things that happened years ago that may or may not have an effect on something that is taking place today. In fact, both the Democratic Party and the media have seemed to, and as well as certain political action committees, seem to have gone out of their way to try and politicize COVID-19 in order to use it as a way in which to make sure that President Donald Trump does not get elected. Now, if you think I'm kidding, just watch this little bit from just one news report on President Trump and COVID-19.
Want to bring in Major Garrett, our chief Washington correspondent. The president there saying we are all in this together, but clearly this address meant to reassure the fears throughout this country.
This is a different crisis for this president and this presidency and this entire administration. You can't give this a nickname. You cannot belittle the coronavirus. It is growing and is spreading, and the president is right. That travel restriction on China, as every public health official we've talked to said, bought the country time. What's the problem now? We don't have enough tests. They're not being administered fast enough, and we don't know how many cases the country has. And that's why you see dominoes falling all day today across sporting venues, colleges, athletic events, people are shutting things down because they don't know what the risk factor is. One of the reasons for that is because the administration was slow to move on testing. And when the president says we will beat this over time, that's not reassuring the markets, and it's not reassuring institutions that have to make decisions about large gatherings because they don't know exactly how threatening this is. And so when the president talks about we're all in this together, he's absolutely right. But the public sees this and needs a lot more reassurance than one Oval Office address.
Extraordinary to hear the President of the United States giving public health advice in terms of washing your hands, staying home from work if you are sick. Want to bring in Weijia Zhang at the White House. And Weijia also announcing some concrete steps in terms of severe travel restrictions.
That's right, Nora. The president just announced that he is restricting all travel from Europe to the U.S. for 30 days and says there will be exceptions for Americans, for example, who have the proper screening ahead of time. But he says anyone and anything that comes into this country will have to undergo extra testing to make sure that when it is here, it is not going to impact Americans. He also talked about significant economic relief that he intends to give to Americans, which includes that payroll tax holiday that he's been talking about. He also said that he would defer the tax payments that Americans have. He directed the Department of Treasury to do that, as well as direct the Small Business Administration to give out loans to impacted businesses. But Nora, this almost plays in to what critics have been saying all along, which is that the president appears to be more focused on the economy and how the virus is impacting the economy rather than the public health part of this. To Major's point, he really did not address what his health officials are doing to make sure tests are readily available, how many Americans have been tested, how many more tests are going out. These are all questions that people want to know as they worry about this virus spreading. So even though he took drastic measures, there are still a lot of questions that he has to answer.
All right, now, mind you, that's just one example, and I could probably have shown you dozens, but I'm not going to get into showing you dozens because I think you've seen them all. You've probably turned on the news and you've seen and heard the exact same things that I've heard. I've even seen as much as, and this is the other thing, is in doing some research, I've come to find that there are a number of entities, political action committees, that are actually investing millions of dollars in ads and ad space and videos to help promote the narrative that, well, this is Donald Trump's fault. Once again, if you don't believe me, all you have to do is watch this ad right here that's been produced by a liberal political action committee known as American Bridges. Check it out.
President Trump's budget plan could threaten America's ability to fight health threats.
Coronavirus crisis continues to spread. More than 80,000 confirmed cases worldwide and over 2,700 deaths.
The Trump administration calling for aggressive cuts to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Cuts that were being suggested in the middle of a coronavirus outbreak.
Top officials are warning that the spread of coronavirus in the U.S. appears inevitable.
The budget cuts to the CDC's research into zoological infectious diseases like coronavirus.
Americans should brace for a possible pandemic.
In 2018, the Trump administration fired the government's entire pandemic response chain of command.
President Trump downplaying concerns around the coronavirus.
The president said the disease will go away as the seasons begin to change.
A lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat. We're in great shape.
I think that we're doing a great job.
Now, they are by no means alone in what it is that they're trying to do. And you notice, once again, how they go from clip to clip to clip to clip. And not really knowing, I don't really have all of the full clips that they use, the original clips that they use when producing these pieces. So I can't really tell you what the reports in each snippet actually say. But mind you, the point behind doing that is, once again, the reporting on COVID-19 to say that this is spreading and it's a pandemic and it's an epidemic, and then showing pictures of Donald Trump, and then showing, once again, the liberal media, the mainstream media, actually attacking him on what he may or may not have done. And by the way, we'll get into that a little bit later in the program, but literally looking to criticize him and blame him for the pandemic that is COVID-19. COVID-19. Our job is to hold Donald Trump accountable, and we have no plans to let up, particularly with a focus on economic issues as we've done to date, said Bradley Baychok, president of American Bridge, which announced this month it would begin backing Biden in key swing states as he aims to lock up the Democratic nomination. The quote continues, "But as this crisis unfolds and the country experiences the consequences of his incompetence, we are not going to give him a pass for bungling the government's response to this pandemic." Now, mind you, most of the stuff that they're talking about in terms of whether or not it was bungled, we fall into one of two areas. One, I think, is an area where most countries have had a challenge, and that is whether or not we have enough resources in place to really address this pandemic if it spreads as quickly as it spread in places like China as well as in Italy. And that is largely not a function of any particular government, but to be honest, no government, no country has really been ready or prepared for the massive, for how quickly this disease can spread and the number and the amount of resources that are needed. And quite simply, it just comes down to this. Even in places like Italy or China, it wasn't so much that they didn't know how to treat individuals and help individuals successfully deal with this disease. It was just that the disease grew so fast, or it spread so fast, the number of people who needed access to healthcare, beds, healthcare professionals, medication, ventilators, and stuff like that grew much faster and farther beyond what anybody had ever expected or was thought possible. So every country largely has dealt with that, and that's one of the reasons why we're taking some of the precautions we're taking now in the United States in order to slow down the spread, right? So that's one issue. But the other is areas where they are just clearly flat out and outright lying. For example, the president's been accused of dissolving the office that's in the White House that's responsible for pandemic responses. But then there was a piece in the Washington Post that was it had to be written as an op-ed piece because, well, let me just read a quote from it for you. It's been alleged by multiple officials of the Obama administration, including in the Post, that the president and his then National Security Advisor, John Bolton, dissolved the office at the White House in charge of pandemic preparedness. Because I led that very directorate, assigned that mission, the Counter-Proliferation and Biodefense Office, for a year, and then handed it off to another official who still holds the post, I know the charge to be specious. And that's from Tim Morrison, the former director of Counter-Proliferation and Biodisease on the National Security Council. So here it is. You have a lie that is being told over and over and over again in the mainstream media. And here you have the individual who was in charge of that office and handed it off to the person who has it today. And yet they still continue to proliferate that lie. So, folks, I'm just telling you to tell you this, and we always get into this, and most of my work has been over the last few years has largely been in dealing with firearms and in Second Amendment stuff, and every single time there is a crisis, every single time there is a mass killing involving a firearm, the first thing that we always try to do is say, you know what, let's not jump to judgment, let's get all of the information and let's get all of the facts first, right? Because we want to know exactly what happened. And usually those who want to ban guns or those who are anti-gun, they jump out there in the very beginning. They say, no, we need to ban all guns and we need to ban them now. We need to we need to shut down the NRA. We need to unelect or kick out of office every politician who's ever taken a nickel from the NRA. Because, see, they're not interested in the facts. They don't care about whether or not the firearm was obtained illegally. They don't care about that stuff. They don't care about whether or not the laws that they are proposing or the gun control that they're proposing would have actually made the difference. They don't care. They want to utilize the crisis to accomplish something else political that they want to do. And that's exactly how they are using this exact same situation. Now, to their credit, there are individuals who are putting country, above politics, right? There are individuals on the left who are doing that, and I wanted to make sure that I pointed them out because I think it is vitally important that, you know, in times like this, and I used 9/11 as the best example of my lifetime. You know, that was a time when the politicos seemed to set aside the personal stuff and really focused on getting our country back on track and getting things back on track and focusing on we the people, not we the politicians or we the media, right? And you have folks like that who are doing that now, at least at moments in time. You have folks like Dana Bash from CNN who has praised Trump as the kind of leader that people need in this particular situation. You even had Ilhan Omar, who has praised and thanked Donald Trump, the president, for his leadership during these times. And you know, those two don't get along on very much, but even she has stood up. You've had Governor Andrew Cuomo, even Governor Gavin Newsom, who have all made statements focusing once again on making sure that we are focused on getting past this emergency. And I just want to make sure that we recognize that not everybody on the left is doing this, but it's important that we understand it is a concerted effort. It is a well-financed effort, and it's one that we not fall prey to. And I'll give you an example. Like for me myself, normally if any of you are Facebook friends with me, you know I have no problem. I have people on the far right and the far left who are Facebook friends, and I have no issue with debating differences in policy or politics. You also know, if you follow me, you know that I have no problem giving Donald Trump credit when he does stuff that I believe is good, and providing appropriate criticism when I believe that he could do better. But with that, one of the things that I've taken to doing that as we're dealing with this, those who call themselves Facebook friends, who are more interested in demeaning the president or bashing the president and using COVID-19 as a guise to do it, as far as those folks, hey, I have made it a point. They now know why they've been deleted or why they've been unfriended or unfollowed or in some cases even blocked. Because, folks, here's the thing. I like disagreement. I believe disagreement is good. That's how we learn. We generally don't tend to learn from people who agree with us. We tend to learn from people who disagree with us. So learning is good. Knowing and understanding what people who disagree with you say helps to educate and inform you. It may not change your mind, but it at least helps inform and educate you. But when you have people in the midst of a crisis, when you have people who are more focused on trying to tear down the leader than they are in addressing the crisis and making sure that we all stand united, those are not people that myself, I'm interested in having as a part of my circle. At that point, I don't want you in my sphere of influence. I don't need you at that point. If that's how you're going to be. Because guess what? When this is all said and done, there will be plenty of time for Monday morning quarterbacking. All right? There'll be plenty of time. So let's focus on getting done what we need to get done now. It's the reason why, once again, if you guys follow me, you know you don't see me doing a lot of criticizing of the governor of California. You don't see me doing a lot of criticizing of Governor Cuomo in New York. I'm largely focusing on, all right, what do we need to do? What are the things we need to do in order to be together? What's the information that we need to be gathering, that we need to have in order to make sure that we're doing what we can or we're doing our part to protect the most vulnerable from this virus. So anyway, it sickens me to see people doing this, and it sickens me to see politicos pushing these sorts of agendas. But folks, it's important for us to understand that it's out there, recognize it, debunk it when we can, and then just make sure that we don't add into or add a part of the proliferation of it, Well, anyway, that's going to be it for this episode of CRATV. We very much appreciate you folks liking and sharing the program, telling your friends about the California Republican Assembly. We are the conscience of the Republican Party. You folks take care.